Okay, so what I'm going to show you today are the beginnings on how to edit a photo in Photoshop, and in particular we're going to create something that's called a double exposure photograph. So to start with, what you're going to do is you'll find two images off the internet, and one is going to be a portrait. Once you've saved that image, you're then going to open it. So open it in Photoshop, and you're going to select your portrait image. The second image you're going to save off the internet is, I have done an image of nature. You can do the same. So I've selected trees. I'm going to show you how we're going to combine those two images together. So to do that, I'm first going to open up my portrait image, and I'm going to press open. So before we get started, I want to show you a few things about Photoshop. The important thing to remember is your layers over here on your right hand side. Currently I've got one layer started already, which is my background image, my portrait. To create a new layer, I'll go down here, and if you hover over it, it should pop up as creating a new layer, and then you click on it. It's your new layer. Every time you want to adjust something on an image, you need to make sure that you're on the correct layer on what you want to edit. For example, if I want to edit this image, my background, I'll have to click on it and make sure whatever I'm doing, I've selected this layer. And then if I want to change something else, or maybe add something over the top of it, I'll do it on my new layer, and we'll have a look at that a bit later. Another thing to remember is over here on your left hand side are where all your tools are that you're going to use. So by just hovering over them, there'll be a little pop-up that comes up with what they do, and some even have add-on options. So my eraser, if I right click on it, I get 3 options on what type of eraser I want. Same with, say, the pencil tool, there's options. Then up here is where you can adjust it. So if I go back to my eraser, I can adjust the size of the eraser, how hard I want it to erase what I'm doing, and the opacity, so if I want it to be completely gone or just a little bit. Over here, we're back on our right side again, is if you click on adjustments, you'll notice there's some tools where you can edit your image. For example, if you wanted to make this image brighter, you click the brightness and contrast, and then I can edit the brightness level. We're not going to go into too much of this today. We are going to go, so then you need to go back to your layers, and you'll see it created a new layer. But I don't want to keep that change, so I'm just going to delete it. So I'll select and delete. You can also click and drag it over to the bin over here if you wanted to delete. One more important thing with your layer is to remember, when you're finished on editing that layer, you want to lock it so you don't accidentally change anything. And my background, your background will do it automatically. But if I wanted to unlock this one, I just go double click it and then just press OK. And then now it's unlocked, and I can do whatever I want to change it. But we're going to keep that one locked for now, so I'm just pressing that locked key. So on my new layer, I'm going to place my image of my trees on top of this image. So to do that, I'm going to go File, Place Embedded, and I'm going to select my image of my trees. I'm going to press Place. And now, so over here you'll have a cancel button and also a tick, which means you're happy with what you've done. So if I press the tick, that means this image is now placed there. But I actually want to move it, so I'm going to go over here and select my move tool, and it comes up with some transformation controls. Yours doesn't show that. To be able to see these points, just go up to the top here and it'll say show transform controls. So if I unclick it, I can't see it anymore. You want to be able to see it, so it makes it easier to change it. If you've got the new Photoshop, what happens is when you start just moving it around, changing the size, it keeps it in proportion. If you want to change the proportion, hold down Shift while you move it, and it will change to however you want it to change, so it loses its proportion. If you've got the old Photoshop, it's the opposite. Well, it used to be, where if you don't hold down Shift, it loses its proportions, but if you hold down Shift, it keeps its proportion. So that's going to depend on what Photoshop program you do have, so you can just test to see which one works for you. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to rotate it because I want my trees going to the sides. I'm going to hover over the corner where I can see my rotation tool come up and turn it around. Now once I'm happy with turning it, I'm going to move it to go line it up with my person's head. What I actually want to do, I'm going to enlarge this a little bit. I'm actually going to hold down Shift because I'm going to change my proportions so I get it where I want it to be. There we go. So currently we can't see much of my portrait because over here the trees layer is on top. If I were to click and drag it to below my layer 0, you can't see it anymore. So whatever's on top is, whatever layer is on top means the image there is also on top. So I want to be able to, I'm actually going to leave this down here, sorry, because I'm going to start, so I'm going to lock this layer first before I forget, and then I'm going to unlock this layer, my portrait. You can also label it to make it easier for yourself if you want. So I'm going to label this my portrait layer, and that we know which layer we're working on. So I've locked my trees layer, so nothing I do will affect this layer, and I'm only going to edit my portrait. And the main tool we're going to be using to create our double exposure is actually our eraser tool. So we're going to find it, and there's our eraser. And then I'm going to adjust my opacity to maybe close to 50%. And then I'm going to leave that as it, so I can see my size. If I were to adjust that, for example, my eraser's gone larger. I don't want it too large. And then the hardness of the eraser is about 50%. So now I'm going to start erasing because I want my trees to start coming out from the back of my portrait. So I'm going to start erasing, and you'll start to see the trees forming. So the reason I haven't got my opacity up to 100% is because I don't want to get rid of my portrait layer completely, not just yet. I still want to be able to see some of it. The more you go over what you're erasing, it will keep taking it away, as you can see. This checkered down here is the canvas. It's not either of the images. So what I want to do is actually change the size of my trees so the tree image goes down completely and we're not seeing this checkered area. Same with at the top, I don't want to see that difference. So I'm going to unlock my trees image and I'm going to adjust it at the top as well as at the bottom. And just press enter to place it. Now what I want to do is I want to blend out this area a bit more so it's not looking too unnatural. So I'm going to click, lock my trees layer again and go back to my portrait. Get my eraser and I'm going to turn the opacity right down. So it's only taking away a little bit. I'm also going to adjust the size and take that down as well. So if you do something you don't want, just press Ctrl Z to undo it, or you can go edit up here and then undo. So you can check by zooming in if you're happy with everything. You can see over here I've erased too much. So what I want to do is adjust my trees. So I actually want it to blend completely. Again, I'm going to check that I'm happy with how it all looks. And then zoom out. And that is pretty much your double exposure. So it's one image layering with another image. So in this one we've got the girl morphing into trees at her back. So a few other things that you can do, it's up to you, is change your image size. So if you have issue with your image size, for example, if you're not happy with this gap area and you just want her going right up the top, two ways to do it is either crop the image. You can go press your crop tool, which is over here, and bring it down to where you want to crop it, and then just press your tick, and now your image is cropped. I'll probably even bring it down a bit more. Another way to do it is if you want to go up here, press image, and you can press your image size, and it gives you the size, your width, your height, and also your resolution. If you've selected a small image off the internet, your resolution is going to be high. It's very unlikely that it'll be at 300. It may be below 100, and that's when, so if your image is looking very pixely, you want to be adjusting your resolution here, so you could bring it up to 100 or 2 to see what you want to do. You could, let's have a look at it again. Alright, so now that I'm happy with my image, that's my double exposure done. When I want to save it, what I'm going to do is go File, Save As, and you're first going to save it as a Photoshop file, which it's going to do automatically for you. So over here where it says Format is where it says what type of file you're saving it as. We're going to go label it as a double exposure, for example, and it will be a Photoshop file. And then pick where you want it to be saved. Press save, okay, and that's done. I also am going to save it as a JPEG file. The reason I saved it as a Photoshop file first is if I want to go back to that image, I can edit it. I'll have all my layers kept there and I'll be ready to edit again. But I'm going to save it as a JPEG file because I'm happy with how it is, and this saves it now as an image, and I'll be able to submit it. So you'll be able to submit it on Google Classroom as a JPEG. You won't be able to save it, you won't be able to submit it on Google Classroom as a Photoshop file, so you need to make sure you are doing a JPEG file as well. And then you can leave it as the same name and press save. And then I'm going to take up my quality, take it up higher, and then just press OK. That's the only bit you need to change. And then that's your image done. So once you've saved it as your JPEG, then what I want you to do is submit it onto our Google Classroom task as your first double exposure.